Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And let's talk about Deutsche Bank for the millionth time in the last month.
Josh, what Deutsche Bank again?
I know. Well, you know what, John? I mean, it's one of the craziest domino effects I've ever seen because, we could go into the history of banks collapsing and how it's affected the world economy, but Deutsche Bank is massive. It was one of the world's biggest banks at one point, and it was demoted to a small lender. They tried to combine it with Commerzbank, another fraud-filled terrible bank, try to put it together. That failed. We saw massive layoffs a few years ago. They were talking about laying off 1%, 1,000, and then 10%, 10,000. And now, guess what, guys? On top of being, made into a bad bank or creating their own bad bank system, we see that Deutsche Bank is to slash another 18,000 jobs in a sweeping restructuring, as this Associated Press article says. And I think that, there's no surprises here, but I recently went to the Deutsche Bank headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany, and trolled them a bit. Had to watch out for falling bankers, the kind of stuff you have to watch out for in the collapse of an economy. But, we have to remember that Deutsche Bank has been incredibly controversial, has spoofed markets, has been one of the biggest banks in the world, and has fallen so incredibly far. Their share price keeps dipping. It's just getting ridiculous. And, the worst part is, they're not as bad as some of the other big banks out there. It's just that they're so big, they've fallen a long way.
Hey, Josh, sorry to interrupt you, but before you go into that article, I want to just say one little thing that just happened in Germany, and it was actually, they were saying it was a World War II bomb that they had to defuse, and of course it was right by the ECB headquarters, and I think it was a code word for the money printing bomb that the ECB has created together with Deutsche Bank. I think that was the case.
Right in that sea of sewage, that debt. That happened right before I went there. And it's absolutely crazy the level that they've fallen to from where they once were. And I remember when we first reported on it in February 2016, we were talking about how at that time it had a derivative exposure of $75 trillion, the entire world's GDP, with Germany's GDP being around $3.5 trillion. And people say it'll be bailed out. And now we look at it and it's about $45 trillion. Like, that's better. Its cash deposit ratio is falling, not as bad as some others, but nonetheless, we are seeing an Armageddon at Deutsche Bank, and it's no doubt that this was going to happen eventually, but we're going to get into all the details of this in a moment. First, I'm going to go into this article out of the AP as it goes into Germany's struggling Deutsche Bank said Sunday it would cut 18,000 jobs by 2022, assuming that they make it that far, downsizing its volatile investment banking division in a restructuring aimed at restoring consistent profitability and better returns to shareholders. The Frankfurt headquartered bank said it would cut roughly a quarter of its total annual costs from 22.8 billion euros, $25.6 billion, last year to 17 billion euros through steps such as dropping the investment bank's stock trading business. It also plans to slim the division focused on fixed income investments. The aim is to focus on areas where the bank is among market leaders and on businesses with steadier earnings, such as serving corporate customers. For years, Deutsche Bank has wrestled with regulatory penalties and fines, high costs, weak profits, and a low share price. The bank went 3 straight years without turning an annual profit before recording positive earnings of 341 million euros for 2018. CEO Christian Soing took over last year and promised faster restructuring after predecessor John Cryan was perceived to have moved too slowly. Deutsche Bank shares rose 2.5% on Friday to 7.18 euros as markets anticipated a restructuring announcement. That is far below levels from mid-2015 when the shares traded over 30 euros per share. Shareholders received a dividend of only 11 cents per share for 2017 and 2018. The bank said one-time charges from the changes would mean a net loss of 2.8 billion euros in the second quarter. Excluding the charges, net profit would have been about 120 million euros. The restructuring follows the failure in April of merger talks with German rival Commerzbank. Deutsche Bank said the combination would not make business sense, but that left open the question of what strategy the bank could pursue to make its business leaner and more profitable. As part of the restructuring, the bank said it would create a separate unit to dispose of billions in investments that are less profitable or no longer fit its strategy. The bank said it did not expect to have to raise additional capital from shareholders. When complete, the job cuts are to reduce the workforce to 74,000, and the bank would not say where the cuts would fall. Many of its investment banking activities are carried out in New York and London. The bank paid billions in fines and settlements related to behavior before and after the global financial crisis, including a $7.2 billion settlement in 2017 with the Justice Department over selling bonds based on mortgages to people with shaky credit. No way. But that hasn't ended the negative headlines. Two congressional committees have subpoenaed Deutsche Bank documents as part of their investigation into President Donald Trump and his company. Deutsche Bank was one of the few banks willing to lend to Trump after a series of corporate bankruptcies and defaults starting in the early 1990s. Trump had sued Deutsche Bank to stop subpoenas, but a judge in May ruled against the president. Now, I need to kind of break this down a little bit first because, I mean, we have to remember that Deutsche Bank was heavily involved in the financial crisis that has been prolonged to this point. And on top of that, we've gone into in the past their push for collateralized debt obligations. It's not like they're doing things any differently this time. And on top of that, with the Danske Bank scandal and the money laundering, I just find it kind of funny considering the fact that banks seem to be the number one, the number one entity to report people to, these tax revenue agencies, IRS, CRA, wherever you might be in the world. And then they are always like the number one culprits of money laundering at the same time. I just find it a little bit humorous, and we will get into the whole bad bank thing. But first, John, can you just kind of go into the article I just went into? What do you think about this layoff of 18,000 jobs by 2022, assuming they somehow make it to 2022?
2022. Sorry for laughing there, but it's just becoming a joke, this whole Deutsche Bank kerfuffle. And again, how many times do we need to say it? I believe this is the Lehman Brothers 2.0. And for people, if you don't believe that, you're saying that, Deutsche Bank has become a non-insignificant lender, we still got to remember that they're actually, of the list in 2018, they were the top 4 most important, systemically important bank in the world. So
yeah.
For people that think that Deutsche Bank has become nothing, you can remember it's the biggest freaking lender in Europe. It has right now, I think I heard from one of our other YouTube friends over at the Money GPS. He went into I believe it was $43 trillion still of derivatives on the Deutsche Bank books in their consolidated financial statements that came out in 2018. So they still have a significant amount of these derivatives, which is like...
Well, I should add though, John, I mean, they were officially demoted to a small lender, and, they also have had this issue with, you mentioned derivatives, obviously, but they've been forced to redo their living will test for the Federal Reserve as well. I mean, this is part of a bigger epidemic, I think.
Yeah, well, actually, the living will test came out of where? Well, it came out of the Financial Stability Board, which is if none of you are familiar with what the Financial Stability Board, you should probably look into it, because the Financial Stability Board is a new totalitarian dictatorship for central banking. You think the Bank of International Settlements is the technocratic elitist place? No, it's the Financial Stability Board, where you have, I think it's only 15 or 10 to 15 central bankers that sit there, make all the policies for the world, and then they push them out through the G20 system, like the Group of 20, and then it gets implemented into by the financial ministers there into different systems. And if they don't implement it there, they got something called the standard setting bodies on the international scale, which includes the international accounting mechanism, the international securities, the Bank of International Settlements for banks, and then you have the which one have I not mentioned? It's I mentioned accounting. We had banking. We had insurance. So that's the big four, what they call the standard setting bodies, that they push this totalitarian laws, which is actually one of them was the living will that they put out that everybody had to do, and that came from there because the head of the G30, Stephen P. McIntosh, he wrote in his book The Return of state, what was it? I believe it was the return of state control, and the government and big government. And in that book, he actually wrote about how he was very happy that they are not going through the IMF anymore, because the IMF is too many cooks in the kitchen, 167 people voting. That's way too many people involved. So he loved the
zero.
Yeah, he loved the general dictatorship of only like 10 to 15 central bankers making the rules for all the central banks. It was so much easier. And of course, this the GSIB, as they're called, was also from the Financial Stability Board. And that's the list that they put up the most important banks that they need to protect. And of course, it's saying that we need the return of state authority. And that is, of course, the other side of the coin that we're hoping. We're hoping that the state will falter and get destroyed completely because it's so bloated. But they want a totalitarian regime, and they're a technocratic elite that sits there on top of everyone. Meanwhile, you have places like the ECB now. What's interesting, Josh? Who wants to take over at the ECB now when Mario Draghi goes up? Well, actually, it was Mario Draghi creating the Financial Stability Foundation before the Financial Stability Board. So he was the guy that created this whole totalitarian regime in the first place before he became the elitist control over all these nations in the European Union. But then, of course, you have Lagarde, the financial criminal from France that committed criminal activities over in France. She wants to take over now. Of course, they're just like the more criminal activities you do, the more people you rip off, the better and higher positions you will get in this whole elitist system. And
because that shows that they're really good at frauding people and stealing people's money and being able to essentially financially kidnap people's livelihoods. I wanted to also mention, I recently reported on the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, talking about how there's a massive economic slowdown and options are dwindling. Even they are getting to this point where they're like, and this is quote unquote the central bank of central banks, whatever that is, them saying like, look, we are on the verge of something massive and we don't really know what to do. Though officially they'll say, oh, all will be fine, we'll manage this. But I mean, unofficially and in their own papers, they're like, oh, well, there's not much we can do at this point. And that was one of the big problems, was that they're trying to do something. This constant centralization of economies throughout the world, constant attempt to artificially prop up these systems that should not be propped up. Like, the sooner they fall, the better. The more it's prolonged, the worse it will be. And obviously, there's more that I want to get into with that, John, especially regarding this, we had Stephen Kendall on recently. He was talking about the ghost crash and how it's already in a crash on a global stage. I mean, Deutsche Bank would be like one of the first to fire a shot as the dominoes fall down across the globe. But I mean, like, also talking about how, the system is already in a crash. It's just propped up on debt and fakeness, just fake, just nothing's there. It's just all fake. It's all, veneer. And also how, people have been saying, how can you say that it's crashing when technically, according to many of our commenters, you could just prop it up forever without there ever being a I mean, like, that's a lot of people's theories. I wanted you to kind of go into that, John. What do you think? It could just be prolonged forever.
No, you can't. You can't print money forever and think that you'll get away with it. It'll come to a point where the general public would say, like, this currency is garbage, I'm not going to accept it anymore. And we're very close to that point because so many people are feeling it around the world. We got all these indexes around the world just going down. There's a general downturn, and of course, with Stephen Kendall, what he said, I want to touch upon that because we've been in a depression, in my point of view, since 2008 because we just papered over it. We just printed a whole bunch of money, and
Robert Kiyosaki agrees.
Yeah, exactly, and we just felt rich, right, when we did that, but it's just all fake, and of course, it's so funny how Jabba the Hutt over there at Carsten's over there at the BIS says that we're in trouble. These bankers have demolished economies throughout history, Josh. They constantly come back with this idea of banking and come back and rip off a whole bunch of people until they piss the F off of people, and people come with their pitchforks, and they had enough of them. But I think they're trying to, they think that they have built such a system now with all their information that they brainwash people with, that they could keep this system going forever. But what we got to remember, Josh, when they are on their cockiest and think that they're the gods of the world, because that's basically what they think they are. They think that the animal spirits. They think that they're something unique and godlike almost, that they become
manipulate the wealth of the masses and therefore manipulate the attitude and the emotions and the way that the humanity functions. Basically by their whip of a, I guess, wand or button, big red button that says push everyone into poverty and destroy all mankind.
Well, yeah, it's this magical wand thing, and then of course it's all magic because the Federal Reserve has $0 in their fake bank account that they give out to the U.S. to print money with. This is a massive Ponzi scheme again. I don't know how many times we need to say it, Josh, but it's a gigantic Ponzi scheme, and you just need constantly more and more debt. And they believe that they could print this money forever. They believe that now they've gotten so good at it that they would win this time because throughout history, all these 600, 700, 800 central banks and money printing schemes failed throughout history. No, we got a better one this time. Listen to us. We fixed the problem. It's like, no, you have not. The thing is, you will have that until the trust link is broken, Josh. That's when things will hit the fan very fast.
Well, finally, John, I know that we're going a bit further on, and people are complaining about how long our videos are. So I want to try and break it down to this last bit here about the bad bank that we're going to talk about, because as this Bloomberg Business Week article says, what's a bad bank and how can it help Deutsche Bank? And it's this whole article that's talking about how, maybe this could actually help them and prolong their existence and all that kind of stuff. John, can you explain quickly what's a bad bank and what does this mean? Like, how is it possibly going to prop up this debt behemoth?
Well, let me put it in simple terms. A bad bank is raw sewage seeping out of the bank. It's just bad assets that the bank is pushing over there and winding down, getting rid of. And they would fail. There would be mass amounts of failures from them. And they do believe that, within the bad bank, they could actually sell these assets to somebody that really cares. The problem is a lot of these assets are garbage, just paper assets. Like in his new book, as Robert Kiyosaki called it, just fake assets. That are just created on top of assets, on top of assets. So there's like 3-4 layers of assets right now on top of one real asset that's underlaying. That's the real estate, for example. It just come to a point where we just derivatized ourselves away from the real economy and financialized everything. And of course, that's when the death will happen. And during the Mississippi bubble, that was the first kind of financialization of the economy in history in the 1700s, with the French Revolution coming out of it. That at the rear end of it, of course, that was the first time that you financialized. You just printed money. You made money with money, and that when you can get to that point in the economy that you could just make money with money, why work at all, right? And that is what we're coming to here. And we're coming to that point where everybody could just sit on their ass and just do different money schemes. And then everybody would just make money with money, but there's nothing real getting created in the economy. The farmers would stop producing food. The real, like, nobody would care about making any cars anymore. There'd be no need for anything of real value anymore for the populace, and the whole civilization just breaks up and falls down into a massive slump, which I think is coming because of the belief that we could just financially rig the whole economy to prop it up. And and just siphon off money. And just listen lately to a trader. He said that, oh, it's the market making. When every time you make a trade, if you don't make a trade in the system, you are basically a problem if you're hoarding your money. And not constantly trading it into the system, setting a new price. No, that's actually manipulating price. That's financialization, and nobody really cares about the innovation anymore. We have innovated, of course. We've gotten some places, but the problem is, think about where we could be if we actually focused on creating a real economy instead of this fake garbage, raw sewage, seeping out of these garbage banks that are, like JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, and all these other major banks around the world. They don't care about anything but making these financial schemes and then ripping you off, one penny by one penny, the pensioners, everybody. And that's their whole business plan, Josh. And there's nothing that's going to stop that unless we actually say we had enough, we're going to exit out of the banking system. And that's when they're going to panic. And very fast, if we exit out of a fiat system and stop trusting it, it'll be game over within a year. Believe me, like every single hyperinflation happens within a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when it comes down to it, if it weren't for government and banks and how they manipulate the economy, how they prop up major monopolies that people then beg the government to stop by, adding more regulations, taxes, and et cetera, more centralization, all that kind of stuff. If it weren't for all that, imagine how far we would have gone technologically. At this point, how sustainable we would be, how much longer we would be living, our health would be better. All these things would have changed by now. We would be going back to levitating bricks and building new pyramids. Anyway, my point is that in the end, we are the change we wish to see in this world, and we have the most incredible ability to create and innovate and compete and build. And, with currencies as well, competing currencies, outside of this crazy system that's built on debt and servitude and dependence.
Let's make it happen.
Absolutely. Let's make it happen. So again, it all comes down to food, water, shelter, self-defense. You're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block. Gold and silver as wealth insurance, in our opinion, not investment advice, simply our opinion. But I mean, go back in history. You could look at that for yourself, the way that you preserve your own wealth against a crisis, especially. And we've seen with the talk about lowering interest rates, gold and crypto skyrocketing, and that's another one, cryptocurrency that is sound and fundamentally valuable, and most importantly, decentralized. With the subjectivity of value playing into scarcity, application use, demand, blockchain infrastructure technology, etc. I think we can build a beautiful world outside of this system if we actually put our mind to it and stop running away scared and feeling like there's nothing we can do, because there's more options than there are problems. There's more solutions than there are problems. So anyway, as we close this off, I appreciate everyone tuning in. Another long one, but I mean, there's so much to talk about these days. There's no doubt that we have our plate full here at WHAM. So if you want to help us out, check out the subscribe star link below, which keeps us alive. Patreon, GoFundMe, Bitcoin, all those things, as we're shadow banned to death here at World Alternative Media. And only a few things get through the algorithm these days to 130,000 plus subscribers. It's crazy. Also, check out anarchovegas.com and use promo code WHAM to save 10% on your tickets. Anarcho Vegas, an incredible conference. G. Edward Griffin, among many others, Jeff Berg, so on and so forth. Check out the website. It's amazing speakers, amazing event coming up July 21st in Las Vegas. Don't miss it. Again, promo code WHAM, save 10%. And of course, John is putting on his own conference, the Winnipeg Crypto Conference in Winnipeg, Canada. So if you are in the area or want to go to something like that, you could also use promo code WHAM. Again, link is below the video. And finally, I mean, we are heading into this new age, and I think it's more important than ever, as I mentioned earlier, for people to support the independent medias, whether it's myself, Press for Truth, which just got completely demonetized, Ford Fisher and News to Share, completely demonetized. We are changed, even though Luke messes with me way too much. I think it's valuable to keep all these independent medias alive, James Corbett, all those guys. So I highly recommend people going out and doing whatever they can, even if it's just $1 single a month, to help us stay alive. Again, we're going to have subscriber-only content on Subscribestar, and You're going to hear all about this again in the outro. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, we got a lot more coming up right away. We're really looking forward to it. And it's the beginning of something beautiful. I'm optimistic. Guys, don't think we're spreading doom and gloom here because, well, you need to know the doom and gloom before you can, put forward the right solutions. And again, I think we have more solutions than problems. So anyway, John, thanks for going into this with us. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change. Like what you see here at WAM, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon, we can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we're so heavily demonetized and censored and shadow banned. It's getting really bad, folks. If everyone just gave $1 single a month to say Patreon or our Subscribestar, where we do subscriber-only content, we could really get out of this rut that we are currently in as YouTube tries to stifle independent media and prop up the mainstream media. This is really important. This is one of the most important times in independent media history for us to say it's now or never. Let's keep moving forward and let's be that change that we wish to see in the world. Of course, there's also our Bitcoin address below as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And of course, we got events coming up. So make sure to check us out at anarchovegas.com. Anarchovegas.com. Use promo code WAM, that's WAM, for a 10% discount on your tickets. It's on July 19th, 20th, and 21st in, of course, Las Vegas, Nevada. That's anarchovegas.com. Make sure to check us out there and find us on websites like BitTube and Minds, and just try to support independent media, if not myself, any of the other big independent medias out there, to help us continuously bring our message to you free of charge so that we can really change the guard as we move forward into a dramatically polarized, crazy future. Let's try to make it as sustainable as possible. It comes down to you guys. You are the change you wish to see. You guys will help us get through these tough times. So anyway, check out all those links. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Bye.